Your triceps won't grow if you're only doing dips and skull crushers, especially if you've been training for years. So in the next 6 minutes, I'll show you exactly what I learned so you don't waste 7 years like I did. Because for years, I was the guy with the skinny arms, and I was so desperate to change that I blindly copied what some of the biggest guys in the gym told me to do. So at the end of every upper body workout, I did my skull crushers, and later I switched to dips when I got strong enough. I thought that if it works for them, it must work for me. But in all these years, my arms just weren't growing. Something had to be off, so I started researching. And once I started applying what I learned, my triceps started growing so much that people now think I'm on steroids. I realized that I was just moving the weight from point A to point B, but I wasn't actually training my triceps. So that leads us to the question, how do you effectively train the triceps? The first thing I learned is that the largest muscle in your upper arm, the long head of the triceps, can only be fully loaded in one position, overhead. And popular exercises like dips, skull crushers, or close grip bench press, they all train the tricep by straightening the arm in front or beside the body. And because of this arm position, they primarily bias the medial and the lateral head. But the long head is different. It connects higher up, crossing the shoulder joint, which means that the only way to actually stretch and load it is when your arm is overhead. And so many of you guys never train in this position. So if you've been lifting for years and your triceps aren't growing the way you'd expect, this is probably why. The overhead extension should be your main tricep exercise. And even when I switched to the overhead extension, there's 3 mistakes I made, and I consistently see my clients make these as well when I first start working with them. And those mistakes are the reason the long head barely gets trained despite doing the right exercise. The first one is not controlling the weight throughout the entire movement. A cue that works for any exercise really is to pull the weight back down. If you're not actively slowing the weight down, you're not putting as much tension on the muscle as you can. And tension is the most important part of training. The second mistake is doing half reps. And the tricky part is that you often don't even realize this. But there is some evidence that the stretch drives more muscle growth, especially in that overhead position. In any case, I'm of the opinion that training full range of motion is a must, both for muscle growth, but also for joint health. So the next time you're doing a tricep exercise, make sure your forearm touches your bicep in the bottom position, even when it starts burning. And the third one is moving the upper arm forward as you lower the weight. Because what this does, it is actually moving the weight, but you're not bending the elbow. So to get the most out of every rep that you do, slow down the eccentric, find the full stretch every rep, and keep your upper arm locked. Those 3 fixes are what actually load the long head. Now the overhead extension is your main exercise, but it needs to be paired with a second movement pattern. And this is where I wasted years without even realizing it. When I got frustrated that my arms didn't grow despite training them twice a week, I thought, I'll just add another exercise. So I was doing skull crushers, and then I finished off with a tricep pushdown. But what I didn't know back then is that they're the same movement pattern. So instead of thinking in exercises, I want you to think in movement patterns. The overhead extension is your main exercise, and everything else, a dip, skull crusher, close grip bench press, that's your second pattern. And it's just pressing the weight in front of the body. From those, just pick one you can consistently do and can get stronger at. Doing the right exercises matter, but there's one thing that's even more important. And this is something I see all the time, even with guys who've been training for years. They finish their set when the burn starts to get uncomfortable, not when the muscle actually starts failing. This clip here is what training close to failure actually looks like. If your last rep doesn't look like this, you're skipping the most valuable reps for muscle growth. Another way to check whether you're training close to failure is to look at the weights and reps you're doing. Your reps and weight should drop each set. For example, in my second set, I can usually do 2 to 3 reps less than in my first set. And if I learned one thing in all those years I've been working out, is that training close to failure is the single most effective thing you can do for muscle growth. And yes, the burn is uncomfortable, but the burn is not failure. Train to the point where you physically cannot complete the rep with control, because that's what's actually driving growth. And here's the simplest way to program the 2 movement patterns I just showed. Do the overhead extension, either with dumbbells or a cable, on one day, and a pressing movement, a dip, skull crusher, JM press, close grip bench press, on a second day. To keep it simple, do 3 sets each of 6 to 10 reps for compounds and 10 to 15 reps for isolation exercises. And to progress, here's a method I use for myself and all my clients. Keep increasing the reps until you're at the top of the rep range. And once you've hit that top of the rep range, increase the weight by the smallest increment. Reset and build the reps up again. You can find all this in a ready-to-go routine in the link in the description. But when you start tracking your progress, it's not going to be a straight line up. And I see so many guys panic when this happens. They either drop their volume thinking they're overtraining, or swap the exercise thinking it's not working. But here's what's actually going on. If you train your triceps at the end of your upper body workout, which most of you do, your triceps are already used in other exercises. The reality is that some days your triceps are going to be more fatigued than on others, and your numbers are going to reflect that. I had a period where I was going from 18 kilos one week to 14 next, back and forth, and I genuinely thought something was wrong. But when I looked at my progress pictures, months apart, my triceps were growing this whole time, and over time, the weight had actually increased. I just never looked back longer than a few weeks. So don't judge your progress week to week. Zoom out and look at the trend over months. It took me 7 years to grow triceps like this. But what really makes your arms look big in t-shirts is big biceps. So watch this video next and I'll show you exactly how to blow up your biceps so fast people think you're on steroids.